So we are starting our 12 class in depth into the Southern Ocean, the second part of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the Nectar of Devotion. So I would like to acknowledge that I've drawn heavily from the translations of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu done by David Haberman, who's an initiated devotee in the Pushti Marg and also a great scholar of Vaishnavism, and also Bhanu Maharaj, who has translated not only the verses of Srila Rupa Goswami, but also the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And also, I have occasionally, with certain verses, done in-depth consultations with Sanskrit scholars such as Hari Parshad Prabhu, Hriday Nandamaj, Gopinath Acharya, and others. Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the beginning of Nectar Devotion, which should be reiterated, that the Nectar Devotion is authorized scripture. So why do we accept the Nectar Devotion as authorized scripture? Well, one reason is that Srila Rupa Goswami is extensively quoting from scripture to back up what he's saying. And this is very important, as was discussed in the beginning of this presentation about your wonderful educational initiative, that everybody should study Srila Prabhupada's books. Everyone should study scripture. And it's hard to overstate how important this is. As our movement grows, I find more and more people just simply make statements without being able to back them up with something from Shastra or our acharyas. So any points we make, we should be able to back up from Shastra or our acharyas. And of course, sometimes we may make some point as illustration from some empirical source, some scientific study or something of that sort. But still, the main points should be backed up thoroughly by Shastra. So because Srila Rupa Goswami does this, backing up thoroughly with Shastra, for every single one of his points. Therefore, his book itself is Shastra. The second reason that the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the Nectar Devotion are authorized scripture is that Srila Rupa Goswami is basing his whole template, his framework, on the previous work of Bharat Muni. And especially in the Southern Ocean, we're going to learn the template that Bharat Muni is using. So the Eastern Ocean, that's not so evident. But in the rest of the book, in the Southern Ocean, the Western Ocean, and the Northern Ocean, the framework, the way of organizing things given by Bharat Muni is evident throughout this work of Srila Rupa Goswami. So in other words, not only is he quoting scripture for every one of his points, to back up every one of his points, but his overall way of organization is also based on Shastra. Our third reason why we accept the Nectar Devotion and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as Shastra that Srila Prabhupada gives in the beginning of Nectar Devotion is that this framework, the use of this framework, and the use of the way of understanding love of God was given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Srila Rupa Goswami. That Lord Chaitanya instructed Srila Rupa Goswami in Prayag or Allahabad, and on the Dasameda bathing ghat, the Lord instructed him for 10 days, particularly on this science of Krishna consciousness. Of course, many of you will notice that this same understanding of rasa, as given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, was mostly given not to Srila Rupa Goswami, but to Srila Sanatana Goswami. Srila Sanatana Goswami discusses the science of rasa indirectly in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Okay. So I just wanted to mention what I was mentioning was that Lord Chaitanya had particularly instructed this science to Srila Sanatana Goswami, which is, it's very interesting. If you compare Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to Mahaprabhu's instructions, then you'll see that they're mostly given to Srila Sanatana Goswami, but of course he's the guru of Srila Rupa Goswami. So Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu means devotion And rasa, Prabhupada says, is almost impossible to translate into English, though we will be discussing it here. The mellow or relationship or juice or flavor, the nectar, the ocean of that eternal nectar. So here's the Mangalacharana, where Srila Prabhupada writes, in the second division of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the author offers his respectful obeisances unto Sanatana. This Sanatana can be interpreted as either Sri Krishna himself or as Sanatana Goswami, the elder brother and spiritual master of Rupa Goswami. In the case where Sanatana is accepted to mean Sri Krishna, the obeisances are offered to Krishna because he is naturally so beautiful and because he is the killer of the demon Aga. If it is interpreted to mean Sanatana Goswami, then it is because he is so greatly favored by Srila Rupa Goswami, being always served by him, and because he is the annihilator of all kinds of sinful activities. In this division of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the author wants to describe the general symptoms of the transcendental, mellow, loving mood of discharging devotional service. Okay, the structure of this course. So I do expect people to do some preparatory reading. For those of you joining who may be illiterate, you can always listen to an audiobook. So I expect you to read the section of Nectar Devotion and, if possible, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu before the class. So during the class, I'm going to be making presentations and we'll also have interactive activities. And I'm hoping that after each class, that you can have, okay, somebody needs to mute because they're causing an echo. Okay. So after the class, I'm hoping that you can keep a little journal of how you're going to apply what we've been discussing in the class and your reflections on the class. So our aims for this class are to relish the mellow of devotional service to Sri Krishna during the time you're preparing for the class, during the class time, and also during your after class reflection time, so that you're going to bring these realizations into your daily life. So, in other words, I'm hoping that this is not going to be just an intellectual exercise, but you're actually going to be relishing some of this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I'd like everybody to be able to appreciate, meditate on, and be able to explain the five components of rasa. So this Southern Ocean is all about the five components of rasa. And then, of course, two of the purposes of ISKCON here, to bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, and to systematically understand spiritual knowledge and the techniques of spiritual life. And here specifically, this first purpose of ISKCON, as applied to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, to do that as taught by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami. Okay, so what do I expect of, what can you expect of me? You expect of me that I read and study the material in depth, that I have analyzed and organized the material to make it easy to understand and remember. You can expect of me that I plan learning activities. You can expect that I will start on time and that I will end on time. And you will expect of me that I follow Vaishnav etiquette. If in some case I failed to do that, please correct me. What I would like to expect of each of you, that you read and study the material before the class, prepares questions. We will have time for questions in each class. I hope that you will prepare some questions. I hope that you will participate in the interactive learning with the other students and with the teacher when we have breakout rooms. Don't just go away. That you will arrive on time and you will stay for the duration of the class, and that you will follow Vaishnav etiquette. All right, now looking at the Southern Ocean. So the Southern Ocean is made up of 5 waves. Understanding these waves is the essence, it's the key to understanding the whole rest of the nectar of devotion. As my good friend Prabhupada Priya says, if you get this, you're going to be able to get everything else. This is the key. Now, Srila Prabhupada wrote in the Nectar devotion that it is very difficult to find the proper English translations for these words. So I think we're going to use a variety of English translations for these five components. So we're going to refer to them by their Sanskrit words and also a variety of English translations. So the first one is bivaba, which is described in Nectar Devotion, chapters 20 to 26, which can be translated as the ecstatic excitants or the causes of ecstasy. And then anubhava, ecstatic expressions or subsequent ecstasy. Now, the reason Srila Prabhupada uses the word subsequent ecstasy, bhava means ecstasy, and anu means to follow. That's in Nectar Devotion, chapter 27. Then sattvika bhava, which is from Nectar Devotion, chapter 28, which Prabhupada describes as ecstatic expressions or existential ecstasy. Now he's calling it existential because of the word sattva that has to do with existence. But really, the word existential has a very different philosophical meaning in English. This can also be called involuntary ecstatic expressions. Vyavichari bhav, sometimes called sanchari bhav, which is in chapters 29 through 31 of the Nectar Devotion. Prabhupada calls it aggressive ecstasy because Vyavichari and Sanchari means to move. These can also be called transient ecstatic disturbances. Then Staibhav, and Staibhav becomes the main organizer in the Western and Northern oceans. That's chapters 32 to 34 of the Nectar of Devotion, which Prabhupada calls continuous ecstasy based on the fact that stai means to stay or the permanent ecstatic mood. Now, we should mention that in January, I'm going to be, Krishna willing, teaching the Western and Northern oceans through the VIHE in Vrindavan. And anyone who wants to continue their study of the Nectar Devotion can register for those classes. Srila Prabhupada writes, without some mixture of these five ecstatic principles, one cannot relish transcendental bliss. So often what we call rasa, and what Prabhupada will also call rasa, is just the staibab. Just like, so I was born and raised in New York City. New York City is part of New York State. And if you say New York, you could be referring to the whole state of New York, but you could also be referring just to the city of New York. Or we call the whole Western hemisphere of the world, we call the Americas, right? We call North America, South America, the Americas, but there's also a specific country in the Western hemisphere called America. So one can refer to the staibhav informally, that it's not really technically correct, but one can refer to the staibhavs as rasa. And one can also, but really to have rasa, you need to have all these five. Let's look at another way of translating these, and this is the translation that we're going to be using throughout this particular course. So that is that vibhava are the stimulants, anubhava are the voluntary expressions, sattvika bhava the involuntary expressions, vyabhichari bhav the emotions, staibhav the basic connection. So these are the English translations we're going to be using. All right, what is rasa? What is rasa? Very difficult to define what is rasa. Anybody have, if you want to put in the chat, anyone's understanding of what is rasa? Okay, taste, good. Mood, yes, Prabhupada uses the word mood, mellow. Okay. Oh, Narda, excellent. Very good. Ecstasy. Okay, good. All right. Yes, okay. Taste or juice, Gorangi Ganharvika. Excellent. Okay. Okay. It goes far beyond emotions, though. Mahalakshmi. All right. Now, Srila Prabhupada, again, he writes that the relationship, though, is just part of it. Supreme Personality of Godhead, no, that would not be correct. Supreme Personality of Godhead is one part of rasa. Sweetie feels. Okay, I like that. I like that. I like that. Srila Prabhupada writes that he didn't have a good English word for rasa and that he was going to use the word mellow, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had used. However, the word mellow, it really doesn't make it. I mean, Srila Prabhupada himself said that it wasn't the right word. Mellow is an adjective, and it means something very calm and what we would say laid back, like you're relaxing on the beach in a mellow mood. Whereas rasa is a noun. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada explains the concept of bhakti rasa in the preface. And there he says that rasa is the spiritual pleasure of devotional service, which one can taste by being trained in the science of devotional service. So this is a very good definition of rasa. Unfortunately, it's not one word. The spiritual pleasure of devotional service, which one can taste by being trained in the science of devotional service. Now, it's very important to understand that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to study this whole book and that Srila Rupa Goswami wrote this book for the practitioners of Bhakti Yoga to study this whole science of Bhakti Yoga. Prabhupada said this science, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is this science. So again from the preface, Bhakti means devotional service. Every service has some attractive feature which drives every service, everything that we do, not just bhakti, which drives the servitor progressively on and on. That force, this is another nice definition of rasa, the force which drives the philanthropist, the householder, and the nationalist is called rasa, or a kind of mellow relationship whose taste is very sweet. Bhakti rasa is a mellow different from the ordinary rasa. So here Prabhupada's defining rasa as what motivates us, what drives us, why do we do what we do. And I cannot emphasize how important this particular quote from Srila Prabhupada is. Rasa is what drives us. Everything, everything we do, material or spiritual, what motivates us, why we do it, our purpose, our reason, can be called rasa. All right, from chapter 20, which is what we're doing now, that particular loving mood or attitude relished in the exchange of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called rasa or mellow. So a particular loving mood or attitude relished in the exchange of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's another definition of rasa. Particular, and you'll notice that Prabhupada's using the word particular. It's got to be specific. Rasa is very specific. Like in ordinary life, there's a different rasa from mango and from an orange. It's a different rasa. There's a different rasa from an orange and a cucumber. All right, now again, Prabhupada's defining rasa. He's defining rasa. He says, without relishing some sort of mellow or loving mood in one's activities, no one can continue to perform such activities. So again, everything we're doing, it doesn't matter what it is. Anything we do for Krishna, anything we do in illusion, anything we do is to try to relish some sort of loving mood. He says, without it, we can't continue to perform activities. Prabhupada says, similarly, in the transcendental life of Krishna consciousness and devotional service, there must be some mellow or specific taste from the service. Sorry, my voice, a little too many classes. This is also such an important point. Such an important point. We should be relishing some kind of rasa in everything we do, or we won't be able to continue it. We can't maintain anything long term, anything, without some kind of rasa. So a literal definition of rasa is juice. If you're going to look like at Ayurveda, the definition of rasa, it's juice. Juice is the substance that carries flavor. Rasa has to have some liquid. That flavor is what we enjoy. So here's another definition of rasa: the pleasure and joy in any experience. Again, whatever that experience may be. You're looking at a sunrise, there's some rasa, there's some juice, there's some flavor you enjoy. Now, rasa can be understood as aesthetic, and we know that Srila Rupa Goswami got again his template, his framework for his book from Bharat Muni. So it's the aim of all Indian art, drama, dance, music, and poetry. So the whole purpose of art is to experience rasa. We could also say that it's the ultimate aim of awareness, the ultimate aim of awareness, which of course differentiates us, as so nicely explained uh, this morning. So it differentiates us from the impersonalists, that we want to everything the reason we're aware, the reason we're conscious is to enjoy rasa. Then the Upanishads describe the self as having different layers of identity with different goals, which Prabhupada talks about once in his books and once in a lecture. The Anamoya, Pranamoya, Manamoya, Gyanamoya, Vijnanamoya, and Anandamoya. So the core layer is consciousness, and the ultimate layer or the goal is Ananda. And rasa is Ananda. It's a superior enjoyment even to liberation. Okay, bhakti rasa. So every substance has a different flavor. There's a different flavor to a cucumber, as there is to an orange, as there is to a mango, as there is to rice, and so forth. And the supreme substance with the supreme flavor is pure love. Prema bhakti. Now, rasa has certain dynamics no matter what type of rasa it is. So there's all different types of rasa, but they all have the same basic dynamics, which was what we're studying today. And again, so important to understand if you want to understand the whole framework of nectar, devotion, and bhakti rasamrita sindhu. So the dynamic is that there's a basic flavor which gets relished when it's stimulated, and it produces transformations and expressions in the person who's experienced it. So what are the causes of bhakti rasa? So it's explained that it's developed only from one's previous life's activities, or if it starts in this life, then it's coming from the association of pure devotees. So it's always coming from the association of pure devotees. It's only by the association of pure devotees that we can experience bhakti rasa, and that may have started in previous lives, or it may start in this life. And what is the first symptom is joyfulness. So the essence of rasa is, again, joyfulness, taste. So what are the ingredients? So please pay very close attention. It is essential to understand this in order to understand anything else. So anything else for the whole rest of nectar devotion, the whole rest of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one has to understand these 5 ingredients. We've already given the list. We've already given the translation. So, you have a pizza. It's a finished pizza, but it's made of different ingredients. So these ingredients of rasa, the dynamics of rasa. So there's a basic connection to the flavor of the thing. There's a basic connection. The Sanskrit for that is staibhav. There's a basic connection that is stimulated somehow. Somehow or other, it gets stimulated. From that relation, from the basic connection, the stimulation has some results. There's some expression. There's a voluntary expression, an involuntary expression, and emotions. So you have the basic your basic connection, it gets stimulated. That has three results: voluntary expression, involuntary expression, and internal emotional expressions. So you have a certain type of affection towards Krishna. Love of Krishna is not just general, it's within a particular type of relationship. Something stimulates that particular relationship, and then there's some results. I do something voluntary to express that stimulation, something involuntary, and I have a variety of feelings. So the basic connection is called the staibhav. Stai means to stay. What stimulates it is called the vibhav. Voluntary expression, anubhav. Anu means to follow. All of the external services we do in our Hare Krishna movement would be in the category of anubhav. Involuntary expressions like crying and shivering. You don't say, I'm going to cry now. It just happens. And then various emotions that flow through us, transitory, moving. They move us. So let's look at this on a mundane level because, again, this operates on for both the spiritual and the material. Let's look at this on a mundane level. So a girl feels a romantic attachment for a boy. That's the staibhav. That's her basic connection. And she hears, oh, he's coming. He's going to be walking down here. That's the vibhav. That stimulates her feelings. So she always has feelings for him, but when she hears he's coming, that's stimulated. That's called the vibhav. And she thought, oh, he's coming. Oh, he's coming. All right, so let me fix my hair. So that's an anubhav. That's a voluntary expression. And then in her nervousness that he's coming, she starts to sweat. She starts to perspire. That's a sattvika bhav. That's an involuntary expression. Then she starts to feel anxious. Oh, is he going to see me? Is he going to like me? That's a vyavichari or sanchari bhav, or an emotional result. So again, these dynamics of rasa are true with everything. As Prabhupada says, rasa motivates everything. So the staibhav, we're putting it in the middle because it's the basic connection. And then it's going to be stimulated by vibhava. Vibhava is stimulating the staibhav, which then results in anubhav or voluntary actions, sattvika bhav or involuntary actions, vyavichari bhav, which are the transient emotion, and all of those combining together create rasa. As we were reading from Prabhupada, you can't have rasa unless you have all of these. So bhakti with samvit, ladini, and rati is going to lead to prema. Okay, so how does one experience bhakti rasa? So the connection with Krishna, the sambandha, it has to be clarified and it has to be intensified. So how does that happen? That happens through our sadhana, mainly through kirtan and deep absorption in the Bhagavatam. So mainly through hearing and chanting. It mostly happens through hearing and chanting. When it finally becomes bhava, then this basic connection is real enough that it can really produce bhakti rasa. Now, some bhakti rasa can be felt before bhava. But to really experience bhakti rasa in its immature form happens at bhava, and then it's tasted fully and easily at prema, slightly at bhava, and in sadhana, one gets only glimmers and reflections of it as the sadhana becomes pure. Now, sometimes bhava is considered part of sadhana, and sometimes bhava is considered part of sadhya. Okay, so questions and discussions. You can put in the chat or you can raise your hand. Any questions or discussions on what we've discussed so far? Examples of glimmers. Yes. So during your sadhana, even though you haven't yet come to bhava, you may be chanting your japa, you may be in a kirtan, you may be seeing the deities, you may be taking prasadam, you may be reading the scripture, anything. You may just be thinking about Krishna and you feel some affection for Krishna and your hair stand on end. You cry and you think, oh, I want to do some service for Krishna. Vyabhichari bhav means the transient emotions. We will be explaining Vyabhichari bhav in depth in some of our classes, but it's the emotions that go through that don't stay, that don't stay. So it's like you're temporarily feeling anxiety. Can I finish dressing the deities on time for the curtains to open? But you're not always feeling anxiety in your relationship with Krishna. In sadhana, one can get glimmers. Does this mean we may experience a few ingredients of rasa, but not all five together, or all five in a minute degree? All five in a minute degree, because you can't have rasa without all five. Excellent question. Regarding the start of chapter 20, is there a specific connection of the killing of the Aga demon? Yes, because in the Sanskrit, Srila Rupa Goswami is using the word Aga, which can mean the Krishna, the killer of Aga, or Aga also means sin. So as Prabhupada translated, and if we go back, so here, if we go back to that slide, we see here, the annihilator of all kinds of sinful activities. So Krishna, because he's beautiful, because he's the killer of Aga, and Sanatan, because he's greatly favored by Rupa Goswami, and because he's the annihilator of sinful activities. So Aga specifically means sins, and it's in the commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami, this Mangalacharana can refer to either Srila Sanatan Goswami or to Krishna. You can also raise your hand if you have a question. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, we have in sadhana, sometimes we get sudden ecstasy, and even while hearing kirtan, also find some ecstasy. Does it come to which category? Sometimes it appears, sometimes not. Yes, that's because we're not fully established yet in our sthai bhav. And so this can be several things. It can be immature rasa, like Prabhupada says, the green mango and the ripe mango, or it can be a shadow or a reflection of rasa. So Srila Rupa Goswami is going to be discussing shadows and reflections of, it was already discussed in the Eastern Ocean, shadows and reflections of bhava, and he's also going to be discussing shadows and reflections of the different components of rasa, and also shadows and reflections of rasa itself. Does anyone else have any questions? Can sthai bhav change, or is it forever fixed? Sthai in and of itself means it's fixed. However, first of all, it can gradually manifest to the practitioner. So when we talk about neutrality, it's explained that everyone has to experience neutrality first before they can experience one of the other rasas if their sthai bhav is in one of the other rasas. And Srila Prabhupada writes specifically in the Nectar devotion that some residents of Vaikuntha are not fully developed in their sthai bhav, and they may go from Vaikuntha to Vrindavan. Also, the jiva can expand and experience more than one sthai bhav simultaneously in more than one form. Like you have Uddhava, who's a creeper in Vrindavan, and then also in friendship, mixed friendship and servitude out of Vrindavan. Of course, he sometimes visits Vrindavan, so when he visits Vrindavan, he's there as Uddhava and he's there as a creeper. So that's pretty far out. And you can be in Ram Lila as a monkey and Chaitanya Lila as one of Lord Chaitanya's associates, and in Krishna Lila as a cowherd boy. So as a monkey, you're there in Dasyabhav. As a cowherd boy, you're there in Sakyabhav. Okay. How does the rasa connect through mind or its experience in heart level, how it reflects? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Anu Rangini Sudevi. Um, on the higher platforms of bhakti, there's nothing of the material mind. The material mind is not active or important on the higher stages of bhakti. Everything's happening directly on the level of the soul. Material rasa is not really experienced by the soul directly. Material rasa is actually some permutations in the mind and the senses that the soul is observing and interpreting as rasa. I hope that answers your question. Why does suffering take one closer to Krishna so that individual anubhava his Sri Krishna's presence? I don't understand this question. Asutosh, do you want to raise your hand and unmute and maybe ask the question so that I can understand it better?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandvat Pranam. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Yeah. So my apologies. I wasn't able to explain my question, but what we have learned from some of the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, that Parikshit Maharaj, when he was very end to really close to the end of his life, he got the opportunity to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. And then that's where he started to feel closer to Krishna more and more. So in a way, he
Mm.
was going through some sufferings, and that's what I have experienced in my life personally. That at certain points I was going through too much suffering. At that time, I did not feel Krishna closer to me. But once I got through it, I started to realize there is a supreme power who is stimulating me, as you mentioned, right? You experience those things, your love stimulates, and then you started to anubhava his presence. So that was my question. Why is that? Like the sufferings usually take you closer to him.
Because when we're suffering, we become aware that we're not the controller and we feel more helpless and dependent. However, it's nice if you can feel that way when you're happy too. You know, we shouldn't be we shouldn't be dependent on suffering. I, I'm sure that I'm absolutely sure that Krishna would prefer that we can experience his presence without our having to go through suffering. And as far as Anubhava, Anubhava is our voluntary expression of service, which hopefully we all do when we're suffering and when we're not. Okay, the last question I'll take, and then we're going to take a break. So Chaitanya Hari asked, how does this connection from our previous life affect our present life in terms of rasa experience? Because generally Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanam Mante Ganavamam Prapadyate Vasudevam Sarvamisi Savahatma Sudurlabhaha. We're very attached to our false ego. We're very attached to trying to be the controller and enjoyer of the world. And generally getting rid of that attachment and starting to experience bhakti rasa takes more than one life. Generally, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. By the association of pure devotees, one can come in one life to bhakti rasa. But generally speaking, those people who are taking up bhakti seriously have had some connection in a previous life because we're stupid and we're stubborn, and that there's no good reason for it. It's our stupidness and stubbornness, and that's just how it is. You know, when I was teaching children, I noticed that we teach often the same things over and over again for years, like we're teaching the grammatical parts of speech over and over again for many years. And I wondered, why do we have to do that? You know, because it just often just takes that long. I mean, sometimes you have a student that you teach it once when they're, 9 or 10, and then they get it. And in the schools that I ran, if kids got it, then they didn't need to study it over and over again. All right, we are going to take a 10-minute break where I am in the world. It is 8 o'clock in the morning, so that's going to be until 8:10. So wherever you are in the world, please add 10 minutes. And we will start, Krishna willing, promptly in 10 minutes. During this break time, please take a break. Get up, move, walk around, drink some water, get some fresh air. Actually, take a break. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hope all of you are back. Okay, we're going to be going through now the different components of rasa. We're going to be going through these again and again and again and again and again. But again, it's extremely important to get this understanding. So we have the vibhava. Vibhava is the stimulants, what stimulates your basic relationship. Now, please mute yourselves. So vibhava has different subcategories. It has a subcategory of alambana or basic, and it has a subcategory of udipana. Now, again, as we go through the Nectar devotion in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, you're going to see that Srila Rupa Goswami is organizing everything like this. He's going to give the alambana and the udipana for each of the rasas. So Prabhupada calls this basic, and he calls this impelling. So the basic stimulus is the vishaya, the object, the ashraya, the experiencer, the devotee, and the udipana, various stimulants. So let's take a material example to explain this. So let's say you're a parent, you have a child. Let's say you're the father, okay? So you have a parental feeling toward your son. All right. The stimulus for that parental feeling, the vishaya, the object, is your son. That's the most basic stimulant for your feeling fatherly, paternal affection is your son. Now, there are other people who can stimulate your feeling of paternal love for your son. Maybe your brothers who have a relationship of uncle with your son. So, your brothers are visiting and they're playing with your son. And when you see your brothers playing with your son, what stimulates your feeling of love for your son is your son and your brother, seeing your brother interacting with your son. Your feeling of love for your child might also be stimulated by your wife, the mother of your child, who has, it's not paternal, but it is parental. So it's close enough to your feelings that you see your wife taking care of your son, you see your wife feeding your son, you see your wife bathing your son, you see your wife talking with your son, and that brings out your feeling of love for your son. Then udipana is all various kind of stimulants. You see a drawing that your son makes. You hear the voice of your son. You see the shoes of your son. And all of those stimulate your feelings of parental love for your son. Now, your feeling of parental love is always there, but still it's stimulated by something. All right, if we're going to take this to Krishna. So let's say there's a devotee that has parental love towards Krishna. There's a devotee who sees Krishna as their son. Maybe they're one of the, as Prabhupada will say, elderly, which doesn't mean people my age. But in other words, the adults, the fully adults who have this parental relationship. So maybe you're one of these residents of Vrindavan who has this parental relationship. So what brings out your love for Krishna? The alambana, the basic thing, vishaya, their object, is Krishna. Now, in almost every single case, there's a few exceptions in some of the secondary saibabs, but in almost every case, the vishaya is going to be Krishna. Again, very few exceptions in some of the secondary saibabs, but you can pretty much assume that the vishaya of the alambana of the vibhava, so general category is vibhava, subcategory alambana, sub vishaya is going to be Krishna. But what Krishna? What form of Krishna? What age of Krishna is going to vary. So if I see Krishna as my child, then my vishaya is especially going to be Krishna as a young baby or as a very little boy, like under the age of 5. I mean, look, I feel maternal affection for our oldest child who's 51 years old. Huh? It's not that I don't. I do. But still, my parental affection is much more stimulated when he was a little baby. So what form of Krishna? Those who feel romantic affection for Krishna, they're going to be more stimulated by Krishna's adolescent form. So what form of Krishna will vary. Like Bhishma was very stimulated by Krishna's form as Arjuna's chariot driver. So it's going to be Krishna, with few exceptions. Krishna's a Vishaya. But Srila Rupa Goswami will discuss what form, what manifestation of Krishna is the Vishaya. Then Ashraya is definitely going to be different according to different rasas, because Ashraya means the devotee who has some similar feeling towards Krishna. So if you have a romantic attraction to Krishna, then the other gopis or the other queens will be the Ashraya. But Mother Yasoda will not be the Ashraya. So we don't really have, I mean, I guess we have some example in modern society of this with romantic love. You know, if a woman's attached to a boy and she sees some other woman who's flirting with this boy, that may also be a kind of stimulus for her. But we definitely see this again in the other rasas in the material world. So that, when you have a feeling of friendship for someone, your mutual friends stimulate that feeling of friendship. Your friends' parents are different. They're not going to stimulate your feeling of friendship in the same way. So Nanda Maharaj is stimulated in his love for Krishna from Mother Yasoda, from Mother Rohini, from his father, his grandfather, his brothers, the other men and women who feel parental love towards Krishna. But his parental love towards Krishna is not stimulated in the same way by Krishna's friends and Krishna's girlfriends. So the Ashraya, specifically the experiencer, the shelter, are those devotees who have a similar love. And this point is very, 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 very important, because as one progresses in bhakti, one starts realizing, do I love Krishna as my lover, as my son, as my friend? One is supposed to particularly meditate on and follow those devotees who have a similar mood. See, Srila Rupa Goswami is writing this book for us to know what to do as we advance in bhakti. Now, udipana is anything that stimulates our love for Krishna. And there are different udipanas for the different relationships with Krishna. But some are common, Krishna's peacock feather, Krishna's flute. Now, devotees who don't have the same relationship with Krishna as you are going to be in the udipana category. Let's think about this even as sadhakas who may not yet have realized a particular relationship with Krishna. So let's say you're a pujari, okay? So your relationship with your deities is, the deities are the Vishaya, they're the object. The other pujaris are going to be the Ashraya. They have a similar mood to you. They're doing similar service. Maybe you have a WhatsApp group with them and your affection for the deities is especially stimulated by them. Then Udipana are going to be all the not pujari devotees. So maybe one of them says to you, oh, I really like how you did Krishna's turban. And that brings out your affection for the deities, but not the same as the other pujaris. And then also in that category would be looking at the clothes of the deities, the jewelry of the deities, and so forth. Or any service. You're a book distributor, you love to distribute books, and the other devotees who are book distributors, your object is Krishna, probably in the form of Bhagavatam. The Ashraya are the other devotees who go out on book distribution with you, and the Udipana would be other things. Prabhupada's talking about book distribution, other devotees who don't go out but encourage you, and so forth. Okay, Anubhava. Anu means to follow. These are what you do when you're stimulated. You address the deities. You go out on book distribution. What do you do? All of the services we do in ISKCON for Krishna would be Anubhavas. And this has two subcategories, things that have strong bodily movements and things that don't. Sattvic abhaves, this is what we do involuntarily. And Srila Rupa Goswami gives different understandings of sattvic abhaves. He talks about the sattvic abhaves in relationship to our staibhav, to our basic relationship, those that are indirectly related to our basic relationship, those that come from an abhas or a shadow or reflection of a relationship, which may happen before we're at the stage of bhava, and varieties of intensity of sattvic abhavas. So again, sattvic abhavas are involuntary. You're chanting Hare Krishna, you start to cry, you perspire, your hair stand on end. You're not planning to do that. You're not saying hair stand on end. That's different from I'm going to start dancing. So I'm going to start dancing is an anubhav, and while I'm dancing, I start crying. That's a sattvic abhav. Okay, Vyavichari bhavs. Vyavichari bhavs are various emotions, right? Again, materially, you're feeling love for your child. Sometimes you're feeling anxiety. My child's learning how to drive. Are they going to get in an accident? Sometimes you're feeling pride. Oh, my child just got top marks in their class. You feel different emotions, but you're not always feeling anxiety about your child. You're not always feeling pride for your child. Those are changing. Those are constantly changing. So in the Vyavichari bhavs or the Sanchari bhavs, Srila Rupa Goswami discusses the varieties of them, talks about the different causes of them. He talks about them in relationship to primary and secondary sthai. The primaries are neutrality, servitorship, friendship, parental, and conjugal, and the secondary are things like wonder, comedy, anger, and so forth. He talks about the stages, well, just like we have stages of emotions from various causes, and the strength of them. So this is a few chapters in Nectar devotion. So this is a larger. The Vibhava section is very large. The Vyavichari, the Anubhav and Sattvic abhav sections are not so large. The Vyavichari bhav section is a little larger. If we think about material emotions, you know, I'm seeing my son, I get stimulated by seeing my son, seeing the other parent, hearing the son's voice, and then all of a sudden I feel some anxiety that they picked up something sharp. So the cause is them picking up something sharp, which fills me with anxiety, which is relation to my feeling of parental, right? And it's going to go through stages. It's going to come maybe mixed with other emotions and have varieties of strength. Okay, the Staibavs, which really the whole Western Ocean is dedicated to the primary Staibavs, and most of the Northern Ocean is dedicated to the secondary Staibavs. So Staibav is the basic relationship. It's also called Rati. Srila Rupa Goswami uses the word Staibav and Rati interchangeably, and then each of the rasas has the same name as the Staibav. So you have a parental Staibav, which leads you to a parental rasa. Like you have a banana smoothie that's made out of mostly bananas. So the primary ones are neutrality, servitorship, etc. Secondary ones are things like wonder and comedy. Pure and mixed, mixed here does not mean impure. Pure means you can be just Krishna's friend, and mixed can be your friendship is mixed with some servitude. How rasa comes from rati. Again, rati is synonymous with saibab, and this is like how does a banana smoothie come from a banana? How does pizza come from, well, we don't have a primary ingredient in pizza. That maybe doesn't work so well. How does a potato subji come from a potato? Like you can't just have a potato, right? You just have a potato. You're not gonna have rasa in just a potato. You have to mix the potato with something. You have to mix it with salt and maybe butter or something in order to get some rasa. You have to cook it with something. Huh? So the stai or the rati, how they produce rasa. Then a very minor point are the colors and the deities of the associated with the stai the various tastes of the stai. He also explains for each stai meeting and separation, and taste the degrees of that stai bhav. All right, we're going to have other diagrams that show more finer details of these relationships. This is our very basic one. Okay, I want you to take a couple minutes and study and memorize this because then you're going to you're going to draw it and write it from memory. By the way, you don't need to have these in a particular order, although this is the order that they're discussed in this ocean. So they're discussed first Vibhav, then Anubhav, then Safika then Vyabhichari Bhav, then Stai. That's the order of the waves. Uh, it probably is good to have Vibhava on the all the way here because it's the stimulus. So if you can just study this, please, and then we're going to have you do it from memory. Okay, see if you can do that from memory. Write it down somewhere. Okay, check your work. If you got all of it right, please put a yes in the chat. Excellent. Okay, now we're going to do it in English. Please take a minute to study this in English. Okay, now write it from memory. Write the English from memory. Give you one more minute. Okay, and check your work. And if you got everything right, please put a yes in the chat. Okay, now we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. So now you're going to write a paragraph. Now don't just write this from memory. You need to write your own paragraph. I don't want you to just memorize this and and copy this. Make it different. So here I want you to do it with the English. So here's a sample. This is a sample. A devotee has a basic connection with Krishna of a cowherd boy. Hearing about Krishna playing ball with his friends is a stimulant. The devotee starting to dance is a voluntary expression. His hair standing on end as an involuntary expression, and he feels eagerness as an emotion. Okay? I don't want you to take exactly this one. Do something different. Take a different basic connection or a different stimulant or a different voluntary expression or a different involuntary expression. Use the English terms. I'm going to read this again. A devotee has a basic connection with Krishna of a cowherd boy. Hearing about Krishna playing ball with his friends is a stimulant. The devotee starting to dance is a voluntary expression. His hairs stand on end as an involuntary expression, and he feels eagerness as an emotion. So I want you to now write your own paragraph using the English terms and put that in the chat. You have 5 minutes. Put it in the chat. You want to have all five. All five need to be there. Anurangini Sudev, you need all five. And use the English words. Use the English words. Basic connection, voluntary expression, all of those words. Excellent, Narda. Excellent. About Narda, yes, this is from Vega Garba. Vega Garba, excellent. He was Srila Prabhupada speaking Krishna Katalia. Very nice. Excellent, Narda Rishi. Now, Prem Prakash Haridas, you have to write all five. Use the English words. Use the English words. Use all five of the English words. Try again. You want to have a whole paragraph. Oh, very, very good, Vivek, but what's the basic connection? Basic connection is what? As a friend, as a servant, you need to add that. Very good, Vivek. Sujana. No, Shriyuta Kamala, no. No, 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 I don't. See if we get any of those Shriyuta Kamala.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Connection. Yeah, but you want to be more specific. Okay. Prabhava Gopal. Okay. Good. Good. Excellent. Excellent. Prabhava Gopal's is excellent. Vivek, oh, you want to add that's the Sakiras. Okay, good. Now put in the English words, Prem Prakash Haridas Prabhu. Good. So Devi Gaurangi, you got everything, but you don't have the emotions. You don't have the Vyavichari bhavs. You got four, but not five. And what you got, the four is excellent, but you need five. Oh, look at this. Sarvani and Srivasuda. Excellent. I like that. You're looking at it from the point of view of a sadhaka. Good. Good. Excellent. Excellent. Paneshwari Lakshmi. Excellent. I want from everybody. Okay. Anurangini Sudevi, pretty good. You didn't get quite the basic connection. Pretty good. Everybody else, please write something. This is the key, everybody. You got to get this key to understand the rest. This is the key that unlocks the whole door. Hearing is not a basic connection. Hearing is a stimulus. Okay, Asutosh Sharma, hearing is not a basic connection. Okay, you've got the other ones there. Karangi and Harvika. Okay. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Gorangi Gandharvika. Perfect. Beyond perfect. You got a beyond 100%. Okay, very nice, Padma Pavitra. Your involuntary is a little off, but everything else was good. Shama Bhakti. Yeah, okay, Shama Bhakti, but that's all a shadow of rasa, but okay, with Kamsa, he doesn't have real rasa. Ekanista Vasuda. Okay. Good. Excellent, excellent. Ekanista Vasuda, excellent, excellent, excellent. Excellent. Sowinya Raman, excellent. All first class. Okay, you didn't get the stimulant. Yivan Ram Narine Eiffel Loop. You didn't get the stimulant. Everything else was good. Okay, very good, Mahalakshmi. Anyone who hasn't posted, please post. You've all got to get this. This is super important. Okay, Kalpatru, you're missing the Anubhav. You're missing the voluntary expression. Okay, now let's look at this with the Sanskrit terms. Same paragraph, we're just using the Sanskrit terms. Devotee has a sty bhav of a cowherd boy. Hearing about Krishna playing ball with his friends is a vibhava. The devotee starting to dance is anubhava. His hairs stand on end is a sattvika bhava. And he feels eagerness as a vyavichari bhava. So go to your same paragraph. You don't have to write this in the chat. Same paragraph. Cross out the English word and put the Sanskrit word. Okay, very nice. Koranki Kantarvika. Golokishwar Harini. Voluntary expression is not happiness. Golekeshwari. Voluntary expression, happiness is a emotion. Okay, what we're going to do now, I'm going to ask you, we're going to work in groups, and we're going to think of some way to remember the English or the Sanskrit, or both, as an acronym. Like the word ISKCON is an acronym. International Society for Krishna Consciousness is an acronym where the first letters have something, or a picture, draw a picture, to make a poem, to make a song, or a story or example from scripture, something that's going to make this easy for you to remember. You have 10 minutes to work on this in groups.